All right, so today I'll be giving my presentation over the book Fair and Foul, and the two topics I chose. So starting off, we're going to look at the destructive side of sports. Although we can see that all sports, no matter what they are, enhance our physical and emotional health regardless of gender as well. This doesn't come without its injuries though. We can see physical injuries occur, we can see mental abuse from coaches or parents through putting their kids down or just being rude and not knowing how to properly instruct and give proper coaching cues. We can see the use of drugs, as some athletes will resort to using drugs to cope with their problems in life or give them an edge in whatever competition they're involved in. We can see eating disorders be a problem as coaches push their kids to meet certain weights to fit their positions and their roles in whatever sport they play as well. We can see overtraining be an issue as some coaches push in their training and don't give enough rest periods, which can result in injuries down the road or more acute injuries that can happen right away. Moving on, why I chose this topic as parents tend to overlook that sports can potentially injure their child for life if they're choosing the wrong methods and modalities when coaching or instructing these kids during their training sessions. This is something that I felt that all kids have dealt with growing up. If you've been involved in sports, as we've had non-accredited coaches coach our teams without any knowledge of how to train these kids and deal with just the youth population. This topic especially caught my attention because it tends to be something that gets hidden in the shadows of view when discussing the negative aspects to being involved in sports. Most parents don't want to talk about how they treat their kids or how coaches treat their kids. A little bit of a background on this. According to Eitzen, 1 in 5 children ages 6 to 19, about 1.35 million people who go to the emergency room each year do so because of sports-related injuries. This statistic doesn't account for overuse injuries, though, which account for about 25% of injuries, which end up being serious. We can see that Little League athletes and young adults being impacted by overuse injuries, resulting in ligament tears, breaks, strains, and sprains. For football players, the chance for a player to have concussion are 11.2 per 10,000 athletic exposures, which meaning games and practice that they've been involved in, followed by 6.9 for lacrosse and 5.4 for hockey players. For males to develop eating disorders, this happens as some sports require weight requirements, as I said, forcing them to meet a certain limit, which can lead to overeating and developing anorexia or other forms of eating disorders. According to Eitzen, the dangerous methods of weight loss for wrestling coaches have been widely accepted as it's been a part of the sport and has went unregulated for years until the death of 3 collegiate wrestlers happened, which shouldn't have gotten to that point, but it did. A little bit of a real-world story here. One story involves an Olympic gymnast named Laura Hernandez, who was an Olympic champion that was dealing with extreme mental abuse from her coach. Her coach would go to the extremes by screaming at her for the tiniest of mistakes or lapses in focus, calling her weak, lazy, or even messed up in the head. She emphasized perfection, not allowing her to have the smallest flaws or mistakes. Hernandez began to think this was normal and rationalized that all the top coaches pushed their young gymnasts that hard to be the best. She started to believe that many coaches publicly berated their gymnasts for gaining weight and developing curves that come with puberty, ultimately just body shaming them, not allowing them to be who they are. And they would push their athletes to train on just dislocating their body and bones to fit their image that they wanted. She had become convinced that was how Olympians were made. Hernandez began to develop some serious depression issues and started to also develop eating disorders due to the extreme mental abuse the coach put her through. In the end, Hernandez ended up taking her to court, and other athletes and Olympians realized that she was right because they've been through the same thing and felt more free to talk about what they've been through. My biggest solution I found in it was that in Little League organizations and competitive organizations, they need to hire trained accredited coaches that know the necessary steps and training methods to take to ensure that their practices are being facilitated in a safe and mentally/physically stimulating environment, promoting and emphasizing skill development instead of winning, as winning is not the focus of the sport, it's skill development. Further questions on this is that one thing to consider is sports organizations need to monitor their coaches who are associated with them, as they could possibly catch the coaches doing unethical things sooner to their players and potentially catch their players doing illegal or harmful things to each other or other people. On to the next topic. This topic caught my attention, and it is the dark side of adult-centered play. We can see adults pushing their kids at a very young age to play, which is not a good thing always. So you can start your kid too young. We can see parents be out of control and just being quite rude to their their players and even kids. We can see that in the adult-centered play that untrained coaches are involved with a lot of sports, which can result in injuries and much more things that are negative towards their athletes. And we can see that parents place excessive demands on their kids, wanting them to do more, work harder. Why I chose this topic is, as growing up, I dealt with a lot of coaches and parents who forced their children to play a sport way earlier than they should have, as they wanted them to be tougher or follow in their footsteps. With that being said, a lot of times as well, parents would be our coaches and would have no background in what they were doing in coaching or how to coach children to emphasize skill development. Lastly, this topic really interested me as growing up playing sports. I found that my parents would place great demands on me, expecting me to do anything they said or to work harder. A little bit of a background on this. According to Eitan, when dealing with untrained coaches, you will notice that they are more unaware of the social and psychological and physical development of children. This increases the likelihood of physical and emotional injuries to occur to the players. We can see coaches using intimidating methods of intimidation, instilling fear in their players by using physical punishment and profanity, which is not okay at any age. We can see that some parents or coaches place great demands on their players, making their sport more like work instead of enjoyable. It can be seen as some parents may try to live vicariously through their children, forcing them to play a sport too soon or by making them play a sport they don't want to play. We can even see that parents may even force their children to play when they're hurt. A real-world story on this is a 14-year-old girl named Katie, who has been playing soccer for 10 years, takes a line drive from a soccer ball during her practice, and she starts to notice that she's feeling a little off and not so much herself. Katie complains of a headache to her coach and that she has vomited as well. Her coach then returns Katie to play the next day, and she ends up actually having another head injury when she collides head going up for a head ball with another player. Katie's then taken to the hospital when she is told she has a concussion. When being ran through the concussion protocol, she tells the doctor that her coach told her she has to win at any cost instead of coming out of the game. This example shows you how if you're not trained to be a coach and how to evaluate your players in these situations, it can potentially lead to a life-threatening injury and can change that athlete's life for life. They could potentially never be able to play a sport again or attain the quality of life that they once had. The biggest solution I found in this is that we need to be educating our parents and coaches more on how to properly work with the youth in sports. They need to be instructed on how to properly address medical needs for the kids when injured, and they need to know proper fundamentals to implement to keep the practice and play environment safe when engaging in play. These coaches need certifications to be able to work with youth and young adults, as there are negative ways to teach youth how to play a sport, such as the only option is winning in that sport. These parents need to know that there is more to a sport than parents and coaches need to know there's more to a sport than just winning. And lastly, further questions. Some other things to look at is that more kids of the age of 9 play sports, but when they become teenagers, we start to see that dwindle off, as in 7 and 10 will ultimately quit playing sports. This could be due to the fact parents place such great demands on their children or their coaches are not training them properly, but it's something to look more into. Maybe sports might be becoming too adult-centered now and less fun, which becomes a huge problem, as we all started playing sports because it was enjoyable and just a way to live our lives and be around other kids our age with the same common goal of wanting to play a good sport. The sports should revolve around the interests of the children, not the adults. So when it comes to practice and all the other stuff that you guys do with your kids, it's best to find what works best with your group, as every kid is different. And that is that.